Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This week I'm interviewing Maggie Mills. Now, this was just a really fun conversation. I went into it not knowing much about her profession at all, and I'll tell you, I was just blown away by Maggie, just her I guess the humility behind just being able to write other people's stories. Maggie is a ghostwriter. She is somebody who has somebody come to her say, I want to write a book about my life and I need help with it, whether it's the editing portion of it, whether it is the just organization portion of it, whether it's that they're just not a good writer and they need somebody to do all of it. So, you've seen famous people write books and sometimes it's, such and such with and then some other name that you may not know very well. Those are ghostwriters. Maggie is a little bit different because she doesn't add her name 10 sizes smaller under that person. She just writes helping the person share their story and just gives the credit completely to them. So her name is not on the book at all. Hence the title of this podcast. I'm just kind of blown away by exactly what she does. I really had a good time speaking with her. We're going to talk about just the world of being a ghostwriter, writing other people's stories, how she writes more than one at a time, how she doesn't get them confused, how she pulls things out of people who, come to her and want to write a book, and then she talks to them and they're like, there's not much going on here. She's able to kind of pull more stories out of them. There's people that, that want to write a book and need help. Maybe they don't necessarily know the most interesting parts of their life and how to kind of beef up their story. So Maggie does that. We kind of just talk the ins and outs of this world. We talk a little bit about her passion for writing outside of this, and she's got some books in the works on the fiction side as well. I really enjoyed speaking with Maggie. I think you're really going to enjoy this one, whether you're a reader, whether you have read people's autobiographies in the past and thought, dang, I didn't know such and such could write so eloquently. Well, maybe you're going to figure out why that's the case today. Really enjoyed this conversation. Here is Maggie Mills. I'm here today with Maggie Mills. Miss Mills, how are you?
I am having a delightful day. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad you're having a good day. I'm always a sucker for aesthetics in the background. No one can see this but me, but you've got like the bookshelf, you got the nice like reading chair you're sitting in. That's going to be really important to what we're talking about later, but you know how to do it up, don't you?
This is my real background. I recently moved, and one of the reasons I chose this place is because it has beautiful classic built-in bookcases that I am in the process of painting. And I'll confess right now, I only have the bottom half painted.
Oh,
the screen, so you can it goes all the way up to the ceiling, but I'm really short. So unless I confess that, no one would know. They think I have a completely finished house. No.
I like it. Well, it's perfect for the view. So awesome. Hardest question of the evening. I didn't bring you on to talk about the bookcases. So let's talk about just who you are. Just introduce yourself and then we're going to dive into it.
Well, I am Maggie Mills, probably the most published author you've never heard of, because I'm a ghostwriter. I don't get credit for my work, and it doesn't bother me. That's probably the number one question I get asked. Don't you want your name on the book? I'm very happy staying in the background. I'm a cheerleader for my authors. I believe everyone has a story to tell, and I love helping them tell it, getting those ideas out of their head and into print. So I make my living reading and writing and using my crazy imagination. It's got to be one of the most fun jobs in the world.
I love it. And I I've read that you said the most published writer that you may have never heard of. I love that. I just wonder, and I'm gonna jump right into a question from what you just said, and then we'll kind of go backwards again. But you said that your name's not normally on the book. I feel like with some ghostwriters, don't they kind of have that too? The big name and then under it, whatever it's co-written or whatever. Yours is not normally like that.
That's correct. And some ghostwriters do. And I recently read an article where ghostwriters were talking about the celebrities they'd worked with. So that was fun for me. But typically, I sign non-disclosure agreements with my authors. So I have fabulous stories. I just can't tell you who they are. And I'm okay with that because not everyone is comfortable with admitting publicly they had a little help. And that's okay. They don't need to.
Well, I've been doing this long enough. I know all about NDAs and what people can and can't talk about. So I'm not gonna ask you any names, but have you written with people that we would know?
Quite possibly, because my clients span all over the place, quite a few genres. A lot of business people, multimillionaires, people, let us say, who earn their living on film and television, people who earn their living in Washington, D.C. Oh my goodness. And not everyone has got like a big 5-star name. I work with a lot of people who could live right up the street with you, right up the street from you, who have incredible life stories they have been inspired to share to help other people. I've worked with people who rags to riches, literally born in a town that had no paved roads and worked their way up to millionaire status. People who've overcome illnesses, just all over the place. People who are victims of terrible tragedies who've come out on the other side. So it could be someone you know of or someone who lives up the street.
Yeah, well, I've talked to the gamut of that as well. There's all kinds of people that you wouldn't think have these amazing stories, but they do. So I'm glad that you're there sharing them. I want to go just to the very basics for the listener that doesn't know what a ghostwriter is. You kind of make jokes in the profile I read about being a dead person who's writing, but what is a ghostwriter exactly? Somebody who doesn't know.
A lot of people think I write exclusively about ghosts or about the dead.
Yeah.
And although I've written some crime. I am the person behind the scene who, if you want to write a book and you need a little help, or you're too busy and don't have time and you just want to talk that book out, it's your story as the author. I call everyone I work with, you are the author, because it's your story. And I work with the author to help them get that story out, to work on the grammar, spelling, and punctuation, to get it in written form. And I also work with people who want to do the writing themselves, but they would like some accountability. They'd like a book coach to help them work through the process. So I work with people on a couple of levels like that. And sometimes people come to me, they've written their book and they want me to dive in and do editing for them.
So what would you, because I know that you do all three of those areas, the coaching, the editing, and the ghostwriting. What area, I guess, is the most popular for what you do? Is it mostly kind of people that just need you to kind of make sense of what they've written down, or is it mostly that you're doing most of the writing, or where's, I guess, your sweet spot with that?
Oh, I have to say that right now, my work is pretty evenly divided between the coaching and the ghostwriting, with maybe 30 to 40% editing for people. And then sometimes that editing can lead into rewrites. I like to think of it as collaboration, because we'll get together on a Zoom call. We start talking it out, coming up with more ideas. So it's a very collaborative process. And I like the word collaboration, although ghostwriting is fun. I like collaboration because as the process goes on, the responsibilities can shift a little bit. Maybe one of us is doing some research. I work with people who are, they bring me transcripts from interviews they've done and say, oh, I had this really good talk. Let's incorporate that. Or I really want to write this section myself, if you could help me, because it was very personal to me. It was something from my childhood. And I feel like I need to get it down on paper first. So every client I work with, every author I work with, we customize the working relationship to them and what their needs are, what their schedule is. And I've noticed a number of authors come to me because they don't feel confident with writing because they have maybe ADD or dyslexia. And for me, it's really exciting to encourage people who would have thought, I can't write a book because I'm terrible at writing. I wasn't an English major, or I don't have the patience. I have difficulty reading. Yes, you can write a book. There are just so many tools and pathways to do that. For instance, some authors, they love the whole process, but they get slowed down when it comes to reviewing what I've written for them. It is very challenging for them, whether with their communication style or their busy schedule. They have a hard time just sitting down reading all the words. That's a challenge for a lot of people. Well, there's so many ways to work with them. They don't have to mark up the documents. We can do audio files. They can have people who do the reading for them, and they work verbally with the comments. People send me voice notes. So we work out the process that works best for them first, and then we go from there.
No, I love that. And like I said before, I've interviewed so many authors. Probably 40% of the 200 interviews I've done is with somebody who's written a book. That's why people come on podcasts once they've written books. So I just wonder, most of the people that I talk to, it's the opposite of, 3 years ago when I started this podcast, what I thought it would be the most difficult part of writing the book. And it's not what to put in. I don't have enough. It's a lot of times what to take out, and they don't feel like they want to take anything out. So is that something you deal with? I'm sure it is in your editing, where you have to tell people that this part is not something that needs to be in there. And how do you deal with that side? Just because, when it's somebody writing their own book and they're kind of doing it on their own, maybe they have an editor, but it's still kind of their baby, if you will. It's already a hard process, but for you to tell somebody that, hey, this part of your life, quote unquote, is not worth 7 chapters. How do you do that?
Well, one does need to be delicate because it is our story, and it is important to us. It's an experience we've had, or an idea we've had, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction or a memoir or a business book. It's very personal to them. So first of all, I honor how important it is. And we approach it from, let's go back to who your reader is, because we define that when we start working. Who's going to read your book? And most people like to start out with, everyone's going to read it. No, that's not the case. I mean, anyone could read it, but we're going to decide who the best market is for your book. And this is where my background in advertising and marketing comes in. We choose a demographic that's most likely to read their book. So when that question comes up, maybe we have a little too much on this topic, I'll say, okay, let's get back to who's going to read it. Let's talk about your reader, and let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish with this book. Are you trying to teach? Are you trying to share your life story? In many cases, people are trying to get a point across. I went through this experience. I learned this. You can too. So I say, does this push your story forward? Does this contribute to the narrative? And will the reader hang on for it? Can you make your point with less? Or maybe you've told the same thing 4 times. And in books that are trying to teach a point, a little bit of repetitiveness is actually very helpful. Storytelling, because we all learn differently. And by just nuancing that story a little bit, people go, oh, yeah, now I get that. So we talk about from the reader's perspective. And I've really never had a problem with authors going, it absolutely must stay. Although I one author insisted, and I said, oh, okay, I understand this is very important to you. And sometimes you need to let the author have their way. But it's very seldom has it come up. There's a lot of cooperation, because by the time we get to that point, we've been working together for quite a while. And there's this level of trust that develops, which is really quite gratifying, because people are trusting me with their very intimate details. And sometimes they're writing about difficult things and they feel they need to tell the truth. For instance, I was working with an author, and it was very much a part of moving the story forward that he share the death of his brother. And this was really, it was many years ago, but still very painful for him to talk about it. And he wanted to be really truthful. And so I said, write out all the details and then let's look at it together. The family had very strong feelings that the brother probably committed suicide. And it was just tearing them all apart. And the author was very open with the family about writing the book. And I said, well, from the reader's perspective, you're still telling the truth if you leave out the fact you suspected it was suicide, because that's the painful part for the family. The family's accepted that this person has died and we've moved on. I said, no, you can keep that. You can keep that in the family. It doesn't take anything away from the story, because the point is you were dealing with things after this death. And that made the author and the author's family be able to work through that part of the book. They're still telling the truth, but the reader doesn't need to know everything to still get a good story. And that also brought a lot of healing to that family. I see that happen a lot. And I'm very curious because of the number of authors you interview. And I was very impressed, by the way. I was looking at all the interviews you did, and I went, wow, I'm in some really good company here. Gosh,
thank you.
I'm like fascinated with who you've interviewed, and I'm going to go back and listen to some more of them. So I'm interested in your perspective. If the authors talk to you about the process of writing the book being emotional, being transformative, if they have conversations with their family about the content, what has your feedback been on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do task you with listening to some of those, because that's a question I almost always ask. One, how did your family react to the book? And most of the time it's in a positive light. Sometimes it's not, but most of the time it's positive. But the other thing that I always like to ask, definitely when people have written books that are emotional, talk about, struggles that they've dealt with their family or themselves. Did you find this book as something just to get on paper to teach other people, or did you find this book healing, or both? Most of the time people say, they found it kind of cathartic, and they found it, helpful for themselves to work through issues. That's what I get most of the time. So does that answer your question?
Yes, then we're having similar experiences. I see so much similarity between what you do and what I do, because you're helping people share their stories. And that's healing for the person telling the story, and for the person hearing or reading the story. By sharing our experiences, so many people are helped. And that's why I feel very honored when people trust me with their stories. This is a very serious thing. Even if they're writing funny stories, we all know what's behind the humor sometimes, don't we?
Absolutely. But you've got it much harder, because the way that I think that this podcast is successful, and the way that it helps people share their story is that I'm not one to interrupt a bunch and, try to put my own 2 cents into everything. So I let people talk and share their story. You have to do the opposite. You have to be their voice sometimes. So that's the hard part. And that's kind of leading to the next question of how do you make sure that everybody that you write for, their true voice is in these books, and it's not just, Maggie Mills writing a very, very informed biography of this person.
I love that question because that's one of the first things we work on when an author and I start working together is to capture their voice. It shouldn't sound like me. And so that comes from the transcripts, from conversations like this, from anything that's already online about them. It's very important that their personality comes through. And so it's little habits of speech they have. For instance, there's one person I work with who's a hilarious character, very hard-hitting East Coast guy, and every sentence has an F-bomb in it. Mm-hmm. And I tend not to use those in my speech when anyone else is around, So that doesn't necessarily come from me. And one of the first things I said to him is, okay, we're going to cut them down, but we're definitely going to keep them there. Because if you release a book that isn't filled with cussing, no one in the world will believe that you wrote it. And the idea is people believe you wrote it. So that's part of that. Also, depending on what part of the world or what part of the country people come from, and if English is a second language, you will notice the way they phrase things. I like to keep that in there because these people are known and they are recognized by their speech patterns, by their cultural references. There are people who they're always quoting movies and always quoting music lyrics. And so we keep those things in there to keep it very personal. And the first chapter we do together, that's where we go, okay, do I have your voice? Is this right? Am I picking up the way you say things? Is it a more formal person? Do they use a lot of contractions? And we combine this with writing in a way that makes them sound professional. Because I'm sure you realize the way we speak and the way we write are completely different. When we're talking, we don't complete sentences. They're full of a lot of ums and you knows and likes. And, we have to get rid of those for writing and still maintain that author's personality. And I think the greatest compliment I ever got was someone was reading the book after they were reading the manuscript from the publishing company. Before the book went live, they were reviewing it, doing final proofreading and everything. And it was someone who had not met me. And they commented, as I was reading the book, it sounded just like Joe Pesci, the actor, And I went, oh my gosh, that's awesome, because that's where this author is from. And this author talks like that. So if you think I've done my job, it doesn't sound like me, because I don't think I sound like Joe Pesci at all.
I don't think so either. I haven't heard Joe Pesci for a while, but I don't think so.
Love doing Fellas. Got to watch that yearly.
Yeah, but I just, what's it like for you? And I feel like it sounds like you probably just kind of take pride in it and you feel like you've done a good job. But when all these, these writers that you help and that sometimes you ghostwrite the entire book, they get these accolades for writing this book and all that. And you said that you're completely in the background. You're not taking any of the credit. I feel like, to me, maybe I'm just a little bit more, I don't know, egotistical, but I would be like, this is me a little bit. Come on, I want a little bit of credit.
I'm so fortunate that I derive my joy from their success. It just only recently occurred to me to go read the online reviews of their books, because I release it. I just let it go out into the world, because many times things will happen to the book after I put the manuscript together, and I have no control over that. So it would just drive me crazy. And I have to say that it it helps my personal growth to be able to let it go, because there is a constant battle with ego, because one needs to have a little bit of ego to have the confidence that they can take on this task for someone. But at the same time, you're releasing your ego because no one will ever know it's you. So I find that a very good exercise. Can I do a good job without getting credit for it? And I do. I want to take as much skill as possible to put into that. So my mother used to have an expression: you don't want to get too big for your britches.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard that myself. So I just wonder too, I could see where this could be a really positive thing, and the other side too, where, if they're getting all these accolades, people are saying it's awesome, maybe that's the time you're like, I wish somebody knew that I was behind this. But the other side of things, when it just wasn't a great book, you're probably just fine with people not knowing. The person that cuts my hair talks about how, there's a good chunk of his clients that he's like, yeah, tell your friends that I cut your hair. But there's a few that just demand a certain hairstyle, look terrible. Like, don't tell anybody that I'm the one that does this. So I feel like you have to be that sometimes, like, don't tell anybody that I was the one that helped you with this. So that kind of leads into that question I asked you before we started. And that is the ultimate hard question. If somebody comes to you and says, I want to write a book about my life. And then you start talking about it and realize this is not going to be that interesting. How do you broach that topic, or do you just write it anyways?
Well, that's where interview techniques come out, because people are more interesting many times than they think they are. They just don't know how to talk about what happened to them. And I believe the first time I ever faced this, it was a great learning experience for me. Many years ago, I worked for a privately owned community newspaper. And that is one of the best experiences for a writer, writing for a small time newspaper. I absolutely loved it. And when you write for a small newspaper, the people you are tasked with interviewing are usually the advertisers. So you need to say something nice about them. And, it makes the world go round. And I was interviewing someone who was a doctor, very dry, really dry guy. Had a hard time getting him to return my calls, like finally get him on the phone. And he was just dull as dirt, really. And he was like, I would ask him questions, and he goes, well, we're open from 8 to 4. We do this, and we'll take insurance. It was the third phone call. I finally pulled it out of him. This guy was leaving the country about once every 8 weeks, traveling all around the world to perform surgery for free on children to help them hear. I went, It took you 3 calls to tell me this? Oh my gosh, tell me more. This is fascinating. So that's part of the challenge, to pull the details out of people. Let's talk about that, because that's one of the challenges of writing. It's so vivid in someone's head, but it doesn't come out that way on paper. You've heard people trying to retell a joke that you know the joke, and they retell it, and you can't even, like, where was the punchline?
Yeah.
And it's the same way with writing a book. So that's where asking a lot of questions comes in handy. Someone said something like, well, I really liked going to my grandmother's house when I was a kid, full stop. Like, now let's move on to the next chapter. I go, no, back up. Okay, tell me about this. Where did your grandmother live? Did she live in the city? Was it a long drive? Did you go on Sundays? Did you walk up the steps to her house? Could you smell what she was cooking through the screen door? Was she a big woman? Did she like to hug you? What did you do with your grandmother? Were your cousins there? Basically, I'm nosy.
I like it. I mean, maybe you're just extremely lucky, but you talk about how you help business people, you help, politicians, all this. I just, maybe, like I said, maybe you're lucky, but you always are able to find kind of that interestingness. Cause I mean, a lot of people are way bigger deals in their own mind than they are in real life. So I just wonder, it never happens where you have to tell people there's not enough here yet.
I've been very fortunate. I have not had to say that to someone. There's not enough here. I was working on a particular type of business book with someone once, and I wound up helping them out by doing some research and coming up with ideas, going, hey, have you talked about this aspect of your business? So I help guide them into adding more details about what they do. So I have had that, like, okay, it's looking a little thin. Let's see what else we can talk about that we can help them with. And let's add some more detail here.
So how many books do you think you've been involved with?
I have no idea. I've never counted. I know a few years ago, I was recording some videos, like educational videos for this particular group to help people with writing skills. And I had to write a little bio to send off so they could tell people why you should listen to me. And I sat down and I went, I've helped like dozens of writers. And then I started thinking about what I did. I went, okay, I've helped hundreds of writers. And then I started thinking about how long I've been working. And I went, I've probably worked one way or the other with thousands of people. That doesn't sound right. But I started thinking about all the jobs I've had and all the work I've done. And I like, that's a lot of people. So I don't count.
So a lot though, enough to ask the question of, you've been doing it long enough. Are you able to kind of, I guess, figure out that, hey, this is going to be a book that's actually going to make some waves, or this is going to be a book that's actually going to be acclaimed? And there's some, others that are just like, hey, this fits the niche. I'm sure all their family members will buy it. So do you have that knack to know this is going to be a good book?
I know what I think is valuable and interesting and helpful. And I've been, and again, with my advertising and marketing background and working in educational publishing, I also learned that things I don't necessarily like will be really popular and make money. And the things I really love may not do so well. And a lot of that has to do with a marketing effort. I was trained to be very quality oriented. And when I was working for the ad agency once, part of my job was going on press checks and making sure everything was perfect. And we did color corrections, and it absolutely everything had to be the best. And then the owner brought in a client, and we were told to follow exactly what the client requested. And what he wanted was crap. I don't know a nicer way to describe it. We weren't going to have pretty pictures. We weren't going to have a lovely design. He literally took a notebook page and hand wrote the copy to sell stuff. And I thought, this is the tackiest thing I've ever seen. And it made a ton of money. So that's when I said, my opinion has very little to do with this. Let it go. The client's happy. They're paying their bills. And you can never tell what's going to sell.
I get that. So you're involved in the writing aspect and in getting that manuscript to the person, and then are they the ones that are responsible for getting, I guess, a publisher and all that, or how deeply are you involved in the process?
Well, it depends on how the author comes to me. Some people come directly to me, and all my work is through referral. So what I will do is, if the author has come to me directly, I will refer them to publishers and PR people. We start talking right away about the marketing of their book. If they come to me through a publisher, in many cases, that publisher is taking care of the marketing for them. I don't do that, but I'm very aware of it when we're working on the book because, again, what's the purpose of writing a brilliant book if no one's going to read it? And marketing's part of it. You need to get out there. I always recommend to people start talking about your book right away. I actually commented to someone today. She hasn't even started writing her book. She's dreaming of writing her book. And she expressed a concern so many authors have. I'm afraid no one will read it. And I said, well, start talking about it now. Start talking to your friends. Start talking to, mention it on social media. Start talking about one of the characters in your book and just watch the reaction. People are going to read your book. They're going to be interested. You're going to pique their curiosity. So while I don't do that promotion, I refer them to people who do. And we're aware of that as we're working on the book, how it will be promoted. I will pull out certain passages that are good for social media posts or certain sections, like this could be a whole blog post. And I always share all that with the authors. And I work with them on their back cover copy and their bio. We're aware of that the whole time we're writing the book. And also that keeps us focused. Again, it goes back to who's going to read your book. Let's make sure we're writing it for them and not everyone. So there's a marketing focus all through the writing focus too.
Yeah. And it's something that surprises me when I talk to authors is another question that I ask definitely people that, 30 years ago did something completely amazing and now they live a normal life is how much of the time that once they write these books, their friends and sometimes even families learning about some of this. I'm shocked sometimes that people, I guess, aren't having these conversations, that it's just a complete shock to everyone around them once the book comes out of exactly, I guess, what they've done in their life. So I think that's interesting for sure. The thing I guess I want to ask you too is it sounds like you said that you're not really involved in the promotional aspect. So, and it also, you talked about how you're able to just kind of wash your hands of the books once they're done. Does it ever happen that you think, oh man, this was a fantastic book, but after I got done with it, it just fell off a cliff. The marketing was awful. And now no one's going to be able to read this amazing book. I feel like that would be kind of tough too, given that you spend so much time on this and then somebody else drops the ball.
I've only seen that happen with one or two books. They went back to the publisher and then I've never heard about them again. And when they come through a publisher, after I finish my work with a client, it's really not appropriate for me to reach out to the author because that's the relationship the publisher has with them. And in some cases, authors will reach back out to me and they stay in touch, which I love. And I've seen one or two books. I went back later and got like, how are they doing? That was awesome. And I can't find them anywhere in print. And it makes me so sad because I wonder what went wrong. What happened? Did you lose your nerve right at the end? Because, oh man, people need to read about what you wrote.
Yeah, I could imagine that would be a tough thing for sure. So, we talk about you writing all these books and you've worked with over 1,000 authors.
Not complete books. I don't want people to think I've written 1,000 books. I'm not that prolific.
Yeah, well, you
together in one capacity or another.
Right, but you've been involved in at least 1,000 stories. I think that's fair to say. So,
the way you put that. I'm using it. I'm stealing it right from you.
All right, well, do it for sure. My question to that is maybe you've already done it, and I just don't know. But do you ever want to, I guess, write your own story? Do you ever want to say, hey, I've learned about so many other people's life, I can make up a lot of lives and I can start writing some fiction books? What do you think about your own story or your own made up stories?
I am working on a series of books just for my own amusement. And when I have quiet time or I go away for a few days, I work on them. And they're very fluffy because I write about so many serious things. I'm writing a series and I need somebody to hold my feet to the fire, somebody to hold me accountable. I'm writing a series about a woman who reaches a stage in life where she knows she's become sort of invisible. You know, it's harder to get the bartender to notice you when you're trying to order your drink, and you can't get out of speeding tickets anymore. And but she realizes, because she's so benign, an incident happens to her. Because she's so benign, she makes the perfect criminal. And someone else recognizes this in her as well. And she winds up becoming an international jewel smuggler, because no one suspects the little lady who looks like a school teacher. So I'm writing a series about a jewel smuggler.
I like it. I think that's awesome. I've read books kind of similar. You know, I about one of the craziest books I ever read was about this 88-year-old lady who was also a serial killer. No one expects this 88-year-old lady. People come to her house. You know, the police come to her house, and she just turns on the charm that, you know, turns her hearing aids off that she can't hear him. It was
Oh my God.
wild. It was
That would
wild.
fascinate me. It reminds me of a very old movie. Oh my gosh. And I think it's been a play a couple of times. Arsenic and Old Lace.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I like that kind of.
Yeah. Well, I am glad you're writing your own books, so to speak, just because I could see it when I wrote that question. I could see it both ways, where you spend so much time writing other people's, stories, and that's your profession, where you don't want to, on your off time, you don't want to deal with your own stuff. Just like chefs are one of the biggest buyers of TV dinners. They don't want to cook outside of the job. So I could see it both ways, but I'm really glad that you're doing some of your own things for sure. I'm going to ask you that same question. Now that you're doing some of that, do you find being able to write your own stuff and escape having, to deal with the constraints of somebody else's story, somebody else's voice? Do you find that cathartic?
I find it so much fun. I surprise myself. I sit down and I start writing because I've had an idea like, oh, wow, I need to put her in this situation and this thing will happen. And when I'm writing for myself or anyone else, I lose all track of time. I have no idea how long I've been writing. And I have found myself, when I'm writing my own work, laughing out loud. I made myself cry once. I was just crying, like, oh,
Wow.
from. And it's just a self-indulgent joy. And that I just really like, how did I think of that? What is seriously wrong with me? Because I'm sitting here, my search history would really get me into trouble, like all different kinds of ways to kill people. And I have a friend who is a doctor, and so I quiz him all the time. He's very good natured about it. And we were out having dinner one night. We were having sushi, as a matter of fact. And I said, so I've got this guy in my story. I need to ask you a question, because he's about a 350-pound man, and he has a bullet lodged in his thigh. Is it possible to dig that out with a penknife? And can you clean the wound with aftershave? Would that work? We're having this conversation over dinner at this crowded restaurant. It's like, well, how deep is the bullet? What type of gun was it? And how long do you have? And I said, basically, we're on the side of the road, and we're using the light off the headlights of his Cadillac. And like, can we make this work?
Hmm. That's awesome. But it kind of brings us back to, I guess, a question that I just thought about when it comes to your ghostwriting. Do you ever have to do kind of your own research into their story? Just again, people think that they're a bigger deal. Sometimes I can imagine people remember things very differently than they actually happen. Does anyone ever tell you stories you're like, I don't think that would be humanly possible? Do you just write it anyways, or what?
Well, it is their truth. It is the way they see it. But one of the people I work with, he gave me a long list of names of people he's known for 30, 40 years, like from the old neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I want you to go interview all these people while they're still alive and get
Oh,
the stories from them.
uh,
So I was getting, that's such a good question you ask. I was getting multiple perspectives of the same childhood. They
mm,
were very, very similar, and each one was hilarious. They didn't contradict one another too much.
mhm.
Yeah, and I would go back and share it with the author, and because it's been a while, he goes, "Oh man, I forgot about that." Yeah, yeah.
Mm, that's
So yeah, multiple perspectives on the same story, but it's been a tribute to the Irish, but never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
yeah. I hear you there. I like that for sure. And it sounds like probably every single person you work with is a little bit different. Depends on their motivations as well, and how much research you have to do, how much editing you have to do. But on average, when you start working with somebody, from the first conversation to actually finishing that manuscript that you turn in, how long is that process normally?
That can take, if it's a shorter business type book, we can do it in 6 months. More researched books can take a year, year and a half of working with the author. And sometimes it has to do with their schedule. A couple of my authors they travel a lot, and we're organizing different time zones and doing calls while I travel as well. So we're matching up. Um, I'm in a train station. I'm at the airport. I'm in a truck stop. What time zone are you in? So coordinating can add a little length to the book process. It's not like we're working on it every day for a year and a half.
Right. Yeah. How many people do you work with at a time? Again, when I talk to authors that write, in the fiction world, there's some that I talk to that's, they write one book in one series at a time. Some of them, like to kind of go back and forth so that it kind of keeps their mind fresh. But I assume you're just very good at note taking, because I would get confused if you're writing with a bunch. You're like, oh, didn't this happen to you? Oh, no, that was the other person I'm working with. So how do you make sure that you're telling their story and not, your other client's story accidentally?
Usually they're so different. I don't get the
Mhm.
stories confused, but there's only so much brain capacity I have. Um, so I found that I don't want to write more than 3 books at one time because
Mhm.
it just burns me out.
Mhm.
And I can coach like maybe 6 people simultaneously, and then write 3 books and edit a bunch because the work is so different. And I think it uses a different part of the brain,
Mhm.
requires a different amount of time, that the variety keeps me interested and motivated. But yeah, can't do more than 3 at a time, because at the end of the day, I'm kind of a zombie. It's like I got nothing. I can barely remember my own name right now. And
Well, that's
I'm
good because it doesn't have to be on the book.
Yeah, yeah. I try to keep it fresh for the author. I tend to write early in the day. I'm a morning person.
All right, I gotcha. I kind of just in wrapping things up, I could ask you just a million questions and dig deeper into the weeds, but I don't think that's going to be beneficial. So let's just talk about how can people connect with you? I don't even know if that's a thing. If you're kind of on referral only, or how can people connect if maybe they're interested in anything you got to say?
Drop me an email, Maggie at maggiemills.com. And I love what I do. And I throw out free advice, whether people want it or not. I just wind up telling complete strangers how to, like, here's how you make an outline for your book. We've
Mm,
just met on a train, but here, let me share this with you. Um, and I offer every month I call them free 30s. You get 30 minutes, ask all the questions you ever want to ask about writing a book to decide if it's something you want to do, or things like that. Cause I love what I do and I want to help people in any way. Um, and I want to encourage people. If you've ever thought you wanted to write a book, do it. Absolutely do it. I've never had an author say to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry I wrote that book." No, they all said, "It was worth it. I'm so glad I did that."
I love that. And I think that's a good exclamation point at the end here. So I really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, I've enjoyed talking to you so much, and I have so much respect for what you do. You're a wonderful interviewer. You ask great questions. You made this a lot of fun. And now I need to go and look at, I was like scrolling through all the podcasts, went, oh my gosh, these people are fascinating. Look at these stories. Wow.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. So that was Maggie Mills. Awesome conversation. Learned so much this week. Just appreciate her coming on. Appreciate her sharing her craft. I urge you to check out her website. If you at all ever interested in writing your own story, I think Maggie would be a fantastic person to work with. Hopefully at some point we get those fiction books she's talking about. That's the time that you're going to truly be able to support her. I would tell you to pick up the books that she's written, but those are given credit to a lot of different people, and we don't necessarily know who those people are. So we just got to thank her for all those books out there floating around. That's just a little bit better because Maggie has some input and her words on the pages to help that person share their story. So appreciate Maggie being here. The link to her website will be in the show notes. Appreciate you being here. If this is your first time listening, go subscribe or follow on Apple or Spotify. Leave a written review on Apple. Even more amazing, leave a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Go follow on Instagram, Not Enough Podcast, Not Enough with Jack Snuff on Facebook, jacksnuff.com. Lots of places to follow along. Make sure that you don't miss that next episode. Over 180 guests in the past. Countless amazing ones. From them, like to say over 180 amazing guests. And some really, really great ones coming up as well. So you don't want to miss when they come out. So follow along if you'll be so kind. But we'll see you next week. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.